I stood outside my mother's house on Christmas Eve, shivering, locked out in the snow. Through the frosted window, I saw her hand, my brother, hot cocoa beside the glowing fire. I hadn't been home in 6 years, but I'd foolishly believed family meant something. Her eyes met mine, cold, deliberate, before she drew the curtain shut. That moment shattered the last piece of denial I clung to. This wasn't an accident. It never was. They needed someone to blame, and I was the chosen one. But this time, I wouldn't beg to be let in. This time, I came to uncover the truth. Snow crunched beneath my boots as I stepped onto the front porch, suitcase in hand, heart thudding with a strange cocktail of dread and hope. The house looked the same, warm lights in every window, smoke curling from the chimney, the faint sound of carols leaking through the walls. My fingers hovered at the doorknob, and for one terrifying second, I considered turning around. But then the door swung open. "Jessica," my mother breathed, as if my name tasted unfamiliar. She pulled me into a quick, stiff hug, her perfume the same heavy floral scent I remembered from childhood. My brother, Eric, appeared behind her with that same lopsided grin that had always gotten him out of trouble. "You're really here," he said, slapping me on the back. "Didn't think you'd show." Neither did I. Inside, the house was drenched in Christmas spirit. A tree, towering and garishly decorated, stood in the living room, surrounded by perfectly wrapped presents. The table was set for dinner. Candlelight, red napkins, even the good china. My mother had gone all out. She always did, but this felt excessive, even for her. "It's like nothing's changed," I murmured. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, brushing my hair behind my ear. "We've just been waiting for you to come back. After everything." I froze. After what, exactly? But she had already turned away, humming as she checked the oven. I glanced at the wall of family photos near the staircase, portraits spanning decades, from school pictures to vacations. My stomach flipped. There was a frame at the bottom, perfectly centered but empty. The glass reflected my face, ghost-like. Dinner was strained, though the food was impeccable. Eric talked about work. My mother beamed at him like he'd cured cancer, and I nodded through spoonfuls of mashed potatoes. Occasionally, she'd ask me something. "Still working remotely?" Or, "Are you dating anyone?" But her eyes never stayed on mine long. They flicked back to Eric, to the fire, to anything else. After dessert, I offered to take a walk, clear my head. She smiled and handed me my old wool coat from the closet. "It's still yours," she said. "We never threw anything out." The cold outside was sharp but refreshing. I wandered around the yard, past the old oak tree, trying to shake the sense of unreality. When I returned, the door wouldn't budge. I twisted the knob. Nothing. I knocked once, twice, then harder. "Mama?" I called, then louder. "Mom!" No answer. I moved to the window beside the door. The curtain was drawn, but a gap at the edge revealed the fire blazing, and Eric stretched out on the couch, laughing at something. My mother walked by with 2 mugs of cocoa, handed one to him, then sat beside him, her head leaning against his shoulder. They looked cozy, content. I pounded on the door. The curtain twitched, and then nothing. The lights in the hallway dimmed slightly. My fingers were stiff from the cold. I shivered. Eventually, the door cracked open an inch. My mother's face appeared, unreadable. "I thought you weren't coming back yet," she said flatly. "Did the door jam?" "No," I said, voice shaking. "You locked it." "Oh," she said lightly. "Must have been automatic. You know this old house." She stepped away, returned with something folded. Without looking at me, she tossed the old wool blanket onto the porch. "Use that if you're cold," she said. "You should have knocked louder." Then she shut the door again. I sat on the top step, clutching the blanket like a lifeline, my breath fogging in the air. Tears stung my eyes, but I held them back. This wasn't an accident. She knew I was outside. She wanted me there. I remembered being 8 years old, standing in the same spot with a scraped knee, crying while she praised Eric for scoring a goal at soccer. Back then, I'd believed I just needed to try harder, be better, be more lovable. Now? Now I knew better. The door opened once more. She tossed a pair of mittens beside me. "Don't catch a cold," she muttered. I stared at her, that face I once loved more than anything. Something inside me cracked. "Did you ever love me?" I asked, barely above a whisper. She blinked, surprised. "Of course. I love both my children." "Equally?" She didn't answer. The door closed again, and I sat in the snow, blanket wrapped tight, mittens untouched, watching the fire flicker behind frosted glass. The next morning, I awoke to the smell of coffee and cinnamon. The blanket I'd used outside was soaked with melted snow. My limbs ached from sleeping curled on the couch. Mom never came back to check on me. Eric, on the other hand, was already sitting at the kitchen table, spooning oatmeal into his mouth like nothing had happened. "Sleep okay?" he asked casually, not meeting my eyes. I didn't answer. Mom placed a mug in front of me without a word, then turned to stir something on the stove. Her silence was louder than shouting. She hummed a Christmas tune under her breath, the same one she used to sing when I was little and sick in bed. Back then, it felt like comfort. Now, it felt like mockery. I couldn't shake the image of her pulling that curtain closed the night before. Later that afternoon, while Mom was out back watering the shrubs, yes, in winter, I wandered upstairs to the attic. I hadn't been up there since high school. Dust clung to every surface. Boxes lined the walls, labeled in her neat cursive. Eric, middle school, Eric, soccer, Eric, baby. No boxes with my name. I opened a few anyway, hoping maybe I'd been included somewhere. Inside one labeled Family Misc, I found a photo album. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. Birthday parties, beach trips, graduations. Eric smiled in almost every shot, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mom, sometimes with Dad. Occasionally, I appeared at the edge of a frame, blurry or turned away. In one photo, Eric held a trophy while Mom kissed his cheek. I was in the background, clapping. It wasn't just memory playing tricks on me. I had always been peripheral. A yellowed envelope fell from between the pages. It was addressed to me, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a scholarship award letter from my senior year. "Congratulations, Jessica Winters. Full academic scholarship. Amount, $18,000. Recipient signature required." Except the signature wasn't mine. It was Mom's. My chest tightened. I stared at the ink, at the perfect loop of her W. She had signed on my behalf, taken my money. I stormed back downstairs, heart racing, but she was on the phone, probably with one of her church friends. I paused in the hallway, out of sight. "Yes, she's back." "No, it's just temporary. Still no job." "Yes, the depression thing is ongoing. She's trying. Bless her heart." She laughed softly. I felt something curdle in my stomach. The way she talked about me, as if I were some burden she carried out of charity, sent me spiraling back to the moments in childhood when I was always the one blamed. Like when Eric broke the living room lamp and I swore I hadn't touched it, or when he snuck out at night and I got grounded for setting a bad example. Mom had always smoothed it over with that same patronizing tone. Jessica's just sensitive. That night at dinner, I barely touched my food. Mom buttered a roll, then looked up at me with a serene smile. "You know, Jessica, I wasn't always sure I wanted to take you in." Eric glanced up from his plate, but said nothing. "What?" I asked, my voice low. "You were so quiet, so different. Your father thought you needed us." I wasn't sure, but I tried. I really did. I stared at her, not understanding. "What are you saying?" Her expression didn't change. "You were already 5. A lot of habits formed by then. Attachment issues. It wasn't easy." I felt the air leave my lungs. "You're not my daughter by blood," she added, as if it were a minor footnote. "But I raised you. That should count for something." Eric took a sip of his wine and avoided eye contact. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood, slow and careful. "Why now?" I asked. "Why tell me this now?" She didn't hesitate. "You came back. I thought maybe it was time." Time to what? Destroy me? Reveal that my entire life was a well-crafted illusion? I only stayed because your father asked me to, she continued, voice soft. He said you needed a stable home, that you were fragile. But when he died, She stopped mid-sentence. I took a step closer. You what? She looked up sharply, the mask slipping. If you hadn't been there that day, she said bitterly, he might still be alive. The words sliced through me like glass. What do you mean? I whispered. She blinked, realizing too late what she'd said. Nothing. But the damage was done. The accident had happened when I was 12. We'd all been in the car. Dad was driving. I remembered the rain, the curve in the road, the way the world turned upside down. But I had always thought it was just a tragic mistake. You think I caused it? I said, my voice shaking. You've blamed me all these years? Eric stood up abruptly. I'm going for a walk. Coward. Mom reached for her glass, fingers trembling just enough to show the truth. I left the table before I could cry in front of her. The old police report came in a plain envelope, no return address. I had requested it anonymously through a friend who still worked records at the department. As I unfolded the papers at a cafe downtown, my hands trembled, not from the cold, but from what I feared I'd find. The accident had been ruled driver error due to inclement weather. I already knew that. What I didn't know, what stopped my breath, was the listed driver. Helen Winters, my mother, not my father. She had always told me he was driving that day, that he lost control because I was arguing with him in the back seat, that I had distracted him, that he swerved trying to hush me, but the report stated clearly, Helen Winters was driving, no mention of any backseat dispute. I sat there for a long time, the page crinkling in my fist. Later, I drove past the curve where it happened. The road was still narrow, slick with melted snow. I stood by the guardrail, staring down the slope where our car had once tumbled. In my memory, it was rain, screaming, smoke, my father's hand reaching back. I remembered the look in his eyes, fear, but not for himself, for me. Back at the house, I found the old locked drawer in Dad's desk, the one Mom had always kept shut. I picked it open with a hairpin. Inside were letters, yellowed receipts, and a small red envelope with my name in his handwriting. I opened it slowly. Jessica, if anything ever happens to me, don't believe what your mother tells you. You deserve to know the truth. One day, when you're ready, find my friend Mark at 4th and Gibson. He'll help you. Love, Dad. I pressed the letter to my chest and sat back, stunned. That night, I confronted her. She was alone in the kitchen, drying a glass. I dropped the report and the letter on the counter. She didn't flinch. You lied to me, I said, my voice cracking. You were the one driving, not him. She set the glass down, slow and deliberate. And? You blamed me. You made me carry it, my whole life. She turned to face me, and for the first time I saw something real behind her eyes. Not guilt, not sorrow, contempt. You think I had a choice? She said, voice rising. He was going to leave, take you with him, abandon me. That accident saved me. I took a step back, heart hammering. You're insane, I whispered. She crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and slapped me, hard, open-palmed, years of venom behind it. You were the price, she hissed. The cost I had to pay to survive, and I've paid it every damn day since. I stood there, stunned, my cheek burning, and she walked out like it was nothing. I packed that night. I didn't even cry, just stuffed clothes into a backpack and walked until my feet ached. I found a cheap motel on the edge of town and paid in cash. The room smelled like mildew and regret. That week blurred. I slept on benches, in alleyways, under bridges. The cold crept into my bones the way despair had crept into my soul years ago. One night, I curled up outside a closed gas station, my coat thin and useless, remembering the feel of the snow-covered porch from Christmas Eve. Same cold. Same abandonment. I swallowed the pills on a whim. Over the counter, a few prescription ones I'd kept from old panic attacks, washed down with lukewarm soda from a trash can. I didn't expect it to work, but I didn't really care if it did. I closed my eyes and waited for silence, but instead, I dreamed. My father stood on the hill by the crash site, his shirt flapping in the wind. He looked young, alive, tired, but kind. "You have to finish what I started," he said. "The truth is still buried. Don't let her erase you." I woke up in a panic, heart slamming. My mouth was dry, my limbs heavy, but I was alive. Beside me on the bench, someone had left a bottle of water and a granola bar, no note. I pulled out my phone to check the time. "One new message, blocked number. I know what your mother did. Meet me tonight at 8, 4th and Gibson, come alone." The man waiting at the corner of 4th and Gibson wore a faded leather jacket and the kind of face time doesn't soften. Mark, just like Dad had written. He didn't ask questions, just gestured for me to follow. We walked 3 blocks to a small office above a bookstore. Inside, the heat barely worked and papers covered every surface. "I knew you'd come eventually," he said, handing me a manila folder. "He told me if something happened to give you this." I opened it with trembling hands. Legal documents, account transfers, a will, Jessica Winters, sole beneficiary. I stared at the signature, my father's, dated 2 weeks before the accident. "He never trusted her," Mark said. "He told me she was moving things around behind his back, that if he died, she'd try to erase you." I couldn't speak. My throat was closing. "She got everything," he added, "because you were a minor and she contested the will, claimed it was invalid, claimed he never signed anything." I clutched the papers like a lifeline. My entire life had been stolen from me, my family, my name, even my future. Grief came like a tidal wave, but this time it carried something else with it. Rage. I returned to the motel and stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Eyes hollow, lips cracked. I stared at that face, the one she'd always dismissed, diminished, discarded. Then I screamed. I picked up the nearest object, a cheap plastic chair, and hurled it into the mirror. Glass shattered everywhere, raining over my feet. I screamed again, louder, deeper, until my voice broke. This time, I wasn't collapsing. This time, I was breaking through. The next morning, while eating dry cereal in the motel lobby, I glanced up at the wall-mounted TV. Local news, a charity segment. And there she was. My mother, perfect makeup, sympathetic smile. The host leaned forward, voice gentle. "You've done so much for this community, but what about your daughter?" She sighed, touched her chest. "Jessica's always struggled. She was institutionalized for a time. Mental health is complicated. I haven't heard from her in years. I just hope she's okay, wherever she is." I dropped the bowl. Institutionalized? She wasn't just erasing me. She was rewriting me. That night, I made a plan. I needed access, proof. I created a fake journalist profile, built a website, a LinkedIn page, everything. Rebecca Sharp, freelance reporter covering philanthropic fraud. It didn't take long to schedule an interview. My mother's assistant welcomed me with suspiciously eager arms. "She'll love the exposure," she said, handing me a pass to the foundation's offices. "We've been hoping for national press." The building was sleek, modern, and reeked of money. During the interview, I played my part, curious, impressed, flattering. My mother didn't recognize me. I wore a wig, dark lenses, and kept my voice low. But I could see the cracks, the way she flinched when I mentioned offshore accounts, the way her hands twitched when I asked about charitable audits. Over the next 2 weeks, I returned under the guise of follow-up research. I copied files, took photos, recorded conversations. The deeper I went, the dirtier it became. Money moved through shell foundations, donations laundered through community events that never happened. It was sophisticated, efficient, and it was hers. At night, I began recording my podcast, just my voice, telling my story in chapters. No names at first, no specifics. Just the girl outside the door on Christmas, the missing scholarship, the accident. My inbox flooded with messages, women who cried, men who apologized to sisters, people who said, "That was me too." Within 2 weeks, I had 100,000 followers. they didn't know my name. Not yet. One night, while reviewing scanned insurance documents, I found it. A policy taken out 6 months before my father's death. Life insurance, large payout. Beneficiary, Helen Winters. Claimed 1 week after the crash. Filed under accidental death, no other passengers. She had said she was driving alone. She had lied on the form. And she had collected the check. I leaned back in the motel chair, heart pounding. My hands shook as I reached for the mic. "This," I said into the recorder, "is no longer a story about a girl who was forgotten. This is about the woman who erased her and what happens when she remembers everything." I titled the final episode, "The Truth on Christmas Eve." I recorded it in a single take, raw and unfiltered. My voice cracked. I didn't stop. I spoke of the scholarship she stole, the accident she caused, the will she buried. I told the world that the woman they saw as a saint had locked her daughter out in the snow, just feet away from warmth and safety. I ended with my name. My name is Jessica Winters, and I am not the crazy daughter. I am the forgotten one, the stolen one. And now I'm taking myself back. I hit upload. Within hours, the downloads exploded. It hit 1 million by midnight. By morning, journalists were knocking on motel doors. Hashtags spread. News outlets dissected every episode. Someone dug up my mother's foundation filings. Another found the life insurance claim. The snowball rolled fast, and no one could stop it. The TV network canceled their feature on her charity. The local university rescinded an honorary award. Her publicist dropped her. Then came the subpoena. An investigation was opened. The state attorney's office requested her financial records. Investigators interviewed her board. One of her closest allies flipped and provided emails, correspondence about the forged scholarship signature, discussions of how to manage Jessica's condition if she ever came back. I stayed quiet through it all, watching the empire crumble from the outside. My aunt called me for the first time in years. She was crying. Said she never knew, that she believed what Mom had told everyone, that I'd gone off the rails, that I couldn't be trusted. A few cousins reached out too, some with apologies, some with silence. But none of them really mattered. What mattered was that the truth had finally pierced the perfect porcelain mask. 2 days later, I heard a knock at the motel door. It was Eric. He looked thinner, tired. He didn't try to hug me. "There's something you need to know," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You're not Dad's daughter." The world didn't stop, but my breath did. "What?" He swallowed hard. "Mom told me a few years ago. Said she found out after he died. That she took you in anyway because she didn't want the scandal." I stared at him, too stunned to process it. "She used it to justify everything. Said it's why she never bonded with you." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to throw something. Instead, I closed the door in his face. The next day, my mother went live on her own platform. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup less pristine. She looked less like a savior, more like a woman cornered. "I raised a troubled girl," she said to the camera. "She's manipulating the media. She's mentally unstable. Always has been. I have records, proof." She waved papers, blurred to avoid legal issues. "She's dangerous. I fear for my safety." I watched the stream with a strange calm. Let her fight. Let her swing at shadows. The damage was done. A week later, I appeared on a major talk show. The host was kind but probing. They played clips from my podcast, showed side-by-side photos, one of me on the porch in the snow, captured from a neighbor's security camera, and one of Mom at the fireplace. I read the letter from Dad. "If anything happens to me, don't believe what your mother tells you." The audience went silent. Then applause. Loud, sustained. The lawsuit came next. Civil court, fraud, identity theft, wrongful inheritance. The judge froze her assets. The foundation was stripped of its nonprofit status. Her name, once gold-plated on buildings, was scraped off. She refused to appear in court. But I saw her one last time, outside the courthouse weeks later during a brief recess. She stood beneath a tree, smoking. When she saw me, she smiled, not kindly. "So this is who you are now," she said. "The Crusader." I didn't respond. She flicked ash onto the sidewalk. "You think you're better than me? You're not. You just learned to use the truth like a weapon, just like I did." She leaned in slightly, voice low. "Congratulations, Jessica. You finally became my daughter." I turned away without a word, but inside, I felt nothing but light. The verdict didn't bring joy. There were no celebratory drinks, no victory speeches, no "I told you so." What it brought was quiet, like the hush after a storm has passed, when everything is still standing, but nothing looks the same. I walked out of the courthouse alone. No reporters, no flashing cameras, just the soft crunch of gravel beneath my shoes, and the strange feeling that for the first time in my life, no one was watching me with expectation, judgment, or disappointment. Only peace. The podcast remained live, its episodes passed from inbox to inbox, school to school, therapist to client. A professor at a university called it an emotionally intelligent blueprint for healing generational trauma. A trauma center asked to use clips in their workshops. I said yes, but I didn't offer more. A publisher emailed me 3 times about a book deal. I ignored the first 2. On the third, I replied, "Thank you, but this story wasn't meant to sell. It was meant to set something down so I could finally walk away from it." They understood. A few weeks later, I moved. Not far, just far enough. A small coastal town where the wind always smelled like salt and the mornings came in gentle. I found a storefront near the harbor, a half-abandoned flower shop with cracked windows and soil still lingering in the corners. I called it Second Bloom. It wasn't about selling flowers. It was about helping women like me, women who had been burned by the ones who were supposed to protect them. We gathered every Thursday for tea and silence, or sharing, or crying, or just planting something small and green and letting it grow. Some of them called me a guide, a mentor, a mother. I never claimed any title. I just listened. One night, while closing the shop, I found a letter tucked under the door. No name on the envelope, just my name written in pen. No return address. Inside was a single page. "Jessica, I've followed your story from a distance. I wasn't sure whether to reach out, but I think I'm your biological mother. I never stopped wondering. I hope you're okay. L." I folded the letter slowly. No rush, no panic, no desire to scream or search. I placed it in a box labeled "Later" and returned to washing the flower buckets, because I didn't need answers anymore. That Christmas, it snowed for the first time in years. I lit a fire in the small hearth I had built from reclaimed bricks. The shop was closed, but the lights were on. A wreath hung on the door. Warm cider simmered on the stove. There were no gifts, no tree, just a feeling that something had come full circle. Just after dusk, I heard a knock. I opened the door to find a girl, maybe 10, shivering, her coat too thin, cheeks flushed with cold. Behind her, the street was empty. "Hi," she said, trying to sound brave. "I missed my bus. I don't know where to go." I looked at her, really looked. Not just her face, but her fear. Her trying not to cry. Her waiting for rejection. I smiled. "You're welcome here," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, it's warm." She hesitated, then crossed the threshold. I closed the door behind us. Later, as she sat by the fire with a cup of cider in her hands, I looked around the room. Photos lined the mantel, not of old bloodlines, but of people who had chosen me and whom I had chosen back. Smiling faces, bright eyes, community born not of genetics, but of compassion. I picked up a small frame, a new one, just added that morning. In it was me, standing between 2 of the women from the workshop, dirt on our hands, joy on our faces. Someone had caught us laughing, unposed, unfiltered. This was my family now. And in the warmth of that fire, in the silence of snowfall outside, I finally understood. I hadn't survived her. I had outgrown her.